Hey everyone, welcome to Intune Training, the place to learn about Intune, the Steve and Adam show, with Jake and Riley Childs, aka Duck. Riley is going to walk us through Azure App Proxy, what it is, how we might want to use it within our environment, and how to actually get it set up. I'm going to hand it over to you, Riley.
Yeah. So essentially what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of walk through Azure App Proxy, what it is, how it works, and how it can benefit you. Jake, how often have you been in a situation where you've had an application internally that users need to get on VPN access or any of that sort of situation where they need to be on VPN to access this one single application?
Mm-hmm. It's a pain to have to do that just for that one application for sure.
Yeah. So what Azure App Proxy does is it lets you take a potentially legacy application that uses Kerberos or maybe no authentication at all, like an internal internet portal, and protect it using Azure AD. So it means that even if the application is using legacy authentication technologies, you can still allow it to be accessible externally, allow it to be used externally by your end users, and still apply the same type of policies that you might apply to a more modern application that's using either SAML-based authentication or OAuth. So that would include device compliance things, which we'll kind of talk through what that looks like here later on. But as we kind of get rolling through here, the very first thing we've got is we have got our demo application. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Awesome.
All right. Let me make sure that's right. Yep, that looks good. So I'm going to share my screen here. So I've got my Kerberosweb. This is just a very simple application. We've got two on our web server in our demo environment here, Sampleweb and Kerberosweb. Very, very simple. Literally just a static HTML page for that one. And this one's a little bit more fancy. You can log into it, and right there, you'll see my name or my username, which is just demo admin. And it's just kind of right there. Cool, good to go. But this is internal to my company. So now what that would mean is I cannot access this application externally. I have to be on my company's network, whether VPN or whatever. So what we could do is we could expose it with Azure App Proxy. And we're going to kind of talk you through what that looks like here in a minute, but I'm just going to show really fast. So I'm on my Windows 10 device here. I'm Azure AD joined. I'm not domain joined. I am on the same network as the application server, but I don't have any Kerberos tickets. I'm logged in with an Azure AD identity, or it's a synced identity here. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to open up my applications here. Just going to refresh that. And you're going to notice in my applications that we have this application called Kerberosweb, which is that demo.
It looks like it might have froze, by the way.
Oh, hang on one second. Let's see what's up. Sometimes my screen sharing software can get kind of weird. So we're going to reshare.
Share. Awesome.
We are going to just share the whole screen here. Okay.
There we go.
So there. So now you can see it. So what I would just kind of walk through this again. So I'm on an Azure AD joined device. I'm Azure AD joined. I'm not domain joined. My device name's demo. I have no Kerberos tickets, so we're not doing any type of Azure AD single sign-on to on-premises resources here. And I'm in the My application. So, and for those that don't know, that's just myapp.microsoft.com.
Also available, just going straight to portal.office and then browsing out to your additional apps.
Yep, exactly. And you'll notice that I've got that application Kerberosweb published here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to click on that real fast. It's going to think about it. And oh, cool. So I'm logged in as Duck, AD/Duck. Good to go there. So I'm logged in, but I'm not
with your on-prem identity.
Exactly, my on-premise identity. So let's kind of talk through how that works, and what are kind of some of the components that we have within the environment. So essentially, what we've got is we've got a couple different servers. We've got our Azure AD App Proxy server, which is the one that I was just on a second ago. which is running a very simple application. It's essentially just a proxy application. It doesn't even show up in program files. It's so simple. It's just called the Microsoft or the Azure AD App Proxy agent. That's downloadable from the portal. We'll look at the portal in a second and show how this is set up here. We have our web server, which is just running IIS, and then our two simple applications. All right, just running IIS and our two simple applications. Maybe IIS Manager didn't launch. It did not. We're going to.
It looked like you had typed in IIQ initially, so.
There we go. So we just got our two very simple applications here. No sites. Kerberosweb is configured. So this is a very typical situation that customers will have, or that you might have in your environment where you've got an application that uses Kerberos authentication. We've just got authentication set up for Windows authentication enabled there. And you don't really, so typically you wouldn't be like setting up a sample app. It would be you'd have an application environment that you already have configured. One of my, a customer that I worked with, they had an old SharePoint server internally. They exposed that using Azure AD App Proxy. And they just set up Kerberos authentication, work with that, and they were good to go. And then we've got our nice sample web application right there, which was that just simple web page that I showed you before. And without getting too far into the weeds here, on our proxy server, so that proxy is our Azure AD application proxy server here, we've got delegation set up, and we have use any authentication profile selected, and then we have our Kerberosweb application set up for Kerberos delegation, so that the app proxy server is allowed to delegate and say that it's duck, the duck, whatever user there, right? Alrighty then. So now let's kind of talk through the configuration of this. So for the sake of argument, let me stop sharing this. Or actually, I should be able to just.
I was going to say it appears that it. Oh, never mind. We're good.
No, I'm going to bring that over here. There we go. So now we're in the just app proxy demo tenant that I have set up. Very simple. Not many users, just was set up just for this. So we're going to look at our application. And in the interest of time and the demo gods, I'm not going to go through the process of installing the application proxy agent today. It's very straightforward. You come up here, you hit download connector service, and you run that on the server that you want to use as your proxy server. And then it will just show up right in here. There it is, good to go. And we can click configure an app. And we're going to do that sample web application that we had before. There's no fancy authentication there, so it's a pretty simple one to kind of talk through here. So we're just going to call this sample web. And our internal URL is going to be http://sampleweb. And this would be whatever your internal application is. And it's important to know that you can actually set up this external URL to be anything in this list here, right? So anything that you have a domain associated with your Azure AD tenant, you can use that. You will have to upload a certificate from a public certificate authority for this to work correctly. You could also use an internal certificate authority if that's something that you want to do. But for this to work correctly, you do need you can use any domain that's registered, or you can, but you also need to have a SSL certificate to go along with that. So we're just going to go ahead and leave these settings at the defaults. We don't need to really change any of them. I'm going to go ahead and press add here. So I'm just leaving that default. And it's going to think about it for a second.
Now, even with the default domain selected, are you still going to need to have that certificate in place, or is it only when you select the subdomains?
No, only when you do a subdomain. So only when you do something that Microsoft is not authoritative for, right? So in this case, we're just going to use the msappproxy.net because it's simple. And you got to be patient here. It takes a minute to work at first, but it looks like we're good to go now. So let's go ahead and come down into Enterprise Applications. We are going to come over to our sample web application here. And we're going to do a few different things here, right? So first off, we can just use single sign-on. For sample web doesn't require authentication. So we're leaving that set to disabled. There are some more in-depth options where if you have header-based authentication, you can do it. You can use that. Or your application supports header-based authentication, passing each name in the header. You can do that. You know, if you got password-based an internal application that uses a password, your users can store the password using our web browser extension, and then the web browser extension will replay the password when the user attempts to access it. And then there's also, you know, SAML. If your application does support SAML, but it's internal, you can still use App Proxy for that. You don't have
Probably the most common scenario there.
So yes and no. It is common, but it's not quite as common as you might think, right? So typically, if the application supports SAML, it's potentially exposed externally, but customers do still can use App Proxy to expose internal applications that use SAML authentication externally without having to, you know, potentially have to set up their F5s or configure anything in their environment. It's just this one agent that sits on the server and proxies the traffic. And you can set up multiple STI agents for, you know, load balancing and failover scenarios and that sort of thing. But for this simple application, we're just going to leave this disabled. There's no authentication involved here. So we're going to go ahead. I am going to click this test application button here, and we're going to click open application. Oh, I forgot one more.
You got to add yourself, right?
Yes, I do. So we're going to do 2 users for this, right? We're going to do admin at the default, my admin user here, and we're going to do my duck user, which is my user. Select and assign. So right there. Now we can come down over here, test application proxy, and click open application.
And it's important to note that it's going to try to authenticate with whatever account you're currently signed in with when you hit that button.
Yes. So in this case, it won't. I intentionally selected the disabled, so it's not going to try that type of authentication. Took too long to respond. Hang on, it's thinking about it. What? Oh, there we go.
There we go.
There it loaded. Okay, I was concerned for a second. So in this case, this is a cloud-only user using this application. There's no authentication involved here because this is just a static HTML web page, a very simple application. However, Jake, to your point, if I were to try to, let's say,
connect to that other app you had configured.
Yeah, so let's just do that and see what happens.
Kerberosweb.
There we
Kerberosweb.
go. So application proxy and test application. We're going to actually here, a second, when it loads, we're going to see it, user's not, oh, hang on. Yeah, no, that's not the error that we were expecting.
Gotta add the admin account.
Assign, yay.
It might be good to note going into the single sign-on page and showing what we have configured here as well.
Yep. So we'll get it. We'll kind of in depth about how this is set up in a second, but we'll go through that here in a minute. So let's authorize. Okay. So in this instance, so you'll see that the error is different now. Root cause, user is not defined or is not authorized to access the application of the on-premises Active Directory. So this is because this user, this admin user, is a cloud-only user. I'm not present on premises. You could technically add a user principal name on premises and add this user, and do kind of like a shadow user thing. People used to do with like F5s and whatnot back in the day.
But like we saw earlier at the very beginning, your account was signed in on that other box with the AD/duck. So
yes, but so we'll go ahead. We'll do that right now. So as you can see right here, come on, there we go. We'll come over to our Windows 10 box. It does work for my duck user because my duck user exists on premises. Let's kind of talk through now how this application is set up, because it's a little more complicated than the first Sampleweb application, which is why we're not doing the end-to-end setup as part of this video. So nothing new, you got your properties there, and then you've got your single sign-on configuration. So we had this screen previously, which had all of our different, our 6 different options here, and we selected, I'm so sorry about that. And then we had integrated web and we selected integrated Windows authentication. And for that, we indicate our internal application SPN. And what an SPN is a service principal name. So what that means is that in Active Directory, this web server right here. If we come and look at the domain controller, and we'll take a look at our Web 01 box really fast. Oops, one more thing we got to do. Advanced features, computers, Web 01, properties, and attribute editor. And if your application in your environment should have had this set up from the get-go, it should have been set up from day one. You'll see here that we've actually got this principal name here, Kerberosweb, and Kerberosweb.ad.proxy demo. And so what that means is that on our proxy, like I showed you before, we have a constrained delegation configured for the Kerberosweb application for that, and that relates back to that Web 01 box that's hosting that. So any traffic from proxy is able to say, hello, I am acting on behalf of Duck for Kerberosweb, and Web 01 will be like, looks good to go, sounds good to me. Hang on one second. I'm not sure what's going on here. One of my boxes just decided to reboot on me.
Gotta love it. Should have those maintenance windows configured.
Maintenance windows. You think I'm using SHM to manage that? So back to business here, right? So we've got that. We have that search principal name, that Kerberosweb configured right there. Depending on the application, you may need to adjust what login identity it uses. Typically, user principal name is going to be fine. If you are in a situation where it's kind of a rare situation, where your on-premises user principal name differs from your cloud user principal name, that is when you'd set this to on-premises principal name, user principal name right there, or just the username part, or that sort of thing right there. So that there is times when you might change it. For most applications, user principal name is going to be fine. So then we've got that all set up, and we're good to go there. And what's really nice is that for this application now, so we have this on-premises based application, this legacy Kerberos authenticated application, but now we can actually apply modern controls to it. I believe in a previous video, Jake, y'all talked about conditional access policies. Well, this is a Kerberos-based an app that uses Kerberos-based authentication, but we're actually have it set up to say if you're not on a compliant device,
you're not getting access.
You're not going to get access. So what I can do here is, so we've got our, let me come back over here. We're going to bring out a web browser on my computer right here that's not Intune or Azure AD managed. And we've got that Kerberos web application right there. When we click Kerberos Web, we'll go ahead, we'll hit OK, whatever, that's fine. You cannot access it. That is because I failed. So Kerberos Web, I failed that authentication attempt because the conditional access policy blocked me. So when you can, and I just have it said you got to be on a compliant device, otherwise you're not going to get access. I worked with a customer at one time that wanted that basically they use this even internally as a way to apply modern controls to a legacy application, so that they were in a situation where they could still leverage the power of conditional access. So I have to be on the Intune managed device to gain access to Kerberos Web, and that is Intune App Proxy in a nutshell.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the demo there. That was pretty quick and I think pretty harmless for the most part.
Yeah. This is one of a very quick win sort of thing you can put in to show immediate value. If you first get Azure AD or you're first getting set up with Intune, very quickly you have all these cell phones that you're distributing to your end users. They have this internal mobile application, this internal application that they need to access. You can very quickly use Azure AD App Proxy to expose that to the internet, but apply controls around that application to require them to be on those managed devices to access it. So you don't have to do these complex things like have to have these device-based VPNs to get back on premise.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks again for joining us, Duck, or Riley. We appreciate you.
Yep, no problem.
And with that, if you guys have any questions or gals, any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments. I know we've talked about joining the WinAdmins Discord in the past. Just simply go to aka.ms/WinAdmins. You'll be able to talk to Riley or Duck over there, as well as myself.